The crystal chandeliers sparkled overhead, reflecting in the champagne flutes and silver cutlery scattered across white linen tablecloths. I stood frozen in the center of the Prescott Financial Group's annual shareholders gala, the most exclusive event in Chicago's corporate calendar, wearing a midnight blue gown I had saved specifically for this moment. A moment that was rapidly unraveling before my eyes. "Ms. Bennett," Nathan Prescott's voice cut through the ambient chatter like a blade. "I think you've overstayed your welcome." His lips curled into what could barely pass for a smile. "This dinner is for key stakeholders, and you, unfortunately, no longer qualify." The laughter that rippled through the room felt like needles against my skin. I watched as Rachel Harper, his executive assistant, smirked behind her champagne glass, whispering something to the CFO beside her. I didn't argue. I didn't cry. 7 years of building this company from the inside, of sacrificing weekends and holidays, of turning Nathan's failing enterprise into Chicago's financial powerhouse, and this was my reward, public humiliation. But Nathan had miscalculated. Badly. I simply reached into my clutch and pulled out a letter I had received that very morning, one with a signature that would shift the entire power dynamic of the room, and held it in my trembling hands. "Actually," came a deep voice from the other side of the ballroom, "she may be the only one here with actual controlling interest in this company." Every head turned to see Benjamin Grant, senior partner at Evermark Bank and Trust, walking toward the podium, a manila folder in his hand. The majority shares of Prescott Financial were quietly transferred under a new name 2 weeks ago. He placed the documents on the table, sliding them toward the board members. "And that name is Olivia Bennett." You could have heard a pin drop, then gasps, then stunned silence. Nathan's face transformed before my eyes, smugness dissolving, into confusion, then shock, then something resembling terror. His wine glass slipped from his fingers, shattering against the marble floor. This was the moment I'd waited for. But to understand why this mattered, to understand how a secretary turned executive advisor ended up owning the very company that humiliated her, you need to know how it all began. 7 years earlier, I stood in front of the imposing glass tower of Prescott Financial Group, clutching my worn leather portfolio and repeating the mantra my father had taught me. "Remember who you are, Olivia. Bennett women don't break." I was 26, with a business degree from a state college and experience managing my parents' diner on Chicago's South Side. Not exactly the pedigree for corporate finance, but I had something more. Valuable: hunger. The elevator ride to the 42nd floor felt like ascending to another world, one of power, privilege, and possibility. A world I was determined to enter, no matter how narrow the door. "Olivia Bennett for the executive assistant position," I told the receptionist, trying to keep my voice steady despite the butterflies in my stomach. 20 minutes later, I sat across from Nathan Prescott himself, a man whose reputation preceded him. At 45, he was considered a financial wunderkind, having built Prescott Financial from a boutique investment firm into a respected institution. The gossip blogs painted him as Chicago's most eligible bachelor, all square jaw and tailored suits. "Tell me, Ms. Bennett," he said, barely glancing at my resume, "why should I hire someone with zero finance experience as my executive assistant?" I leaned forward slightly. "Because I understand something fundamental about success, Mr. Prescott. It's not just about numbers, it's about people. Your last quarter reports showed declining client retention despite increased acquisition. That suggests your clients don't feel valued beyond the initial courting phase." His eyebrows raised slightly. "You researched our quarterly reports?" "I did my homework," I replied. "I also noticed your community engagement has fallen by 60% in 2 years. That matters to investors who care about social responsibility." A small smile played at the corner of his mouth. "And you think you can help with this?" "I ran my parents' diner for 5 years. We had regulars who drove 40 minutes just for our coffee and conversation. I know how to make people feel seen, Mr. Prescott. That skill transcends industries." He studied me for a long moment. "You'll start Monday. $55,000 plus benefits. Don't make me regret this, Ms. Bennett." I didn't. Within 6 months, I'd reorganized his chaotic schedule, reconnected with 3 major clients who were considering leaving, and implemented a client appreciation program that received mention in Chicago Business Monthly. Nathan began bringing me to meetings, not just to take notes, but to contribute. I studied financial reports at night and took online courses in investment strategy. I worked 16-hour days without complaint. "You're different," he told me after a particularly successful client dinner. "Not like the other assistants who come and go." You care about the company like it's your own. Because I was starting to see it that way. Every late night, every extra mile was an investment in my future. In our future, as I naively thought then. My breakthrough came during the Westridge account crisis. Westridge Enterprises, a $50 million client, was threatening to leave after a portfolio manager made a series of poor investment choices. Mr. Prescott is unavailable, I told the furious CEO when he called demanding answers. Nathan was in the Bahamas with his latest girlfriend. Then who the hell am I supposed to talk to about losing 8% in 3 months? Mr. Westridge bellowed. Me, I said simply. Give me 48 hours to prepare an alternative strategy. If you don't like what I present, you can walk with no transfer fees. Nathan was livid when he returned. You did what? But when I showed him the restructured portfolio I'd created, one that would recoup Westridge's losses within 2 quarters through a more conservative but steady approach, his anger turned to intrigue. Where did you learn to do this? I pay attention, I said, and I care about our clients. The Westridge presentation went flawlessly. Not only did they stay, but they increased their investment by 20%. A week later, Nathan called me into his office. I'm creating a new position, executive advisor to the CEO. It comes with a substantial raise and profit sharing. Interested? My heart soared. This was it. My hard work recognized, my future secured. Absolutely. Good. He smiled. You've earned it, Olivia. What I didn't realize then was that I was being positioned for something far more complex than a simple promotion. Nathan Prescott didn't create opportunities without calculating every possible outcome, and I was about to become both his greatest asset and his biggest threat. That night, I called my parents at the diner. They promoted me, Dad, I said, tears of pride in my eyes. Executive. Advisor to the CEO. That's my girl, he replied, his voice thick with emotion. Remember though, Livy, the higher you climb, the further there is to fall. Keep your feet on the ground, even as your head reaches for the stars. If only I'd understood then how prophetic his words would prove to be. My promotion to executive advisor changed everything. Suddenly I had an office with a view of Lake Michigan, a dedicated assistant, and access to the inner workings of Prescott Financial. The company was larger and more complex than I had realized from my position as Nathan's assistant, with departments and subsidiaries that operated almost independently. My first directive from Nathan was clear. Find the inefficiencies. Make us leaner, stronger, more profitable. I threw myself into the task, with characteristic intensity. Late nights poring over financial statements revealed patterns others had missed. Profitable divisions subsidizing failing pet projects, resources allocated based on internal politics rather than performance. Within 3 months, I had compiled a comprehensive restructuring plan that would increase profitability by 22% within a year. This is impressive, Nathan said, leafing through my proposal during a private dinner at Alinea, Chicago's most exclusive restaurant. But you're suggesting we eliminate the private client services division entirely? Not eliminate, transform, I clarified. The current model serves 50 ultra-wealthy clients who actually cost us money in specialized services. I'm proposing we expand to serve 500 high-net-worth individuals with a standardized but premium approach. Higher volume, lower service costs, triple the revenue. He studied me over his wine glass. You know who runs private client services? Thomas Adler, board member, 20 years with the company, Yale classmate of your father's. And you're not concerned about the political implications of dismantling his division? I met his gaze steadily. I'm concerned with making Prescott Financial the most profitable it can be. Isn't that why you promoted me? A slow smile spread across his face. Indeed it is, Olivia. Indeed it is. The following week, Nathan presented my plan to the board, as his own. I sat silently beside him, watching as he took credit for every insight, every innovation I had developed. When board members asked detailed questions, he'd glance at me subtly, and I'd slide him the relevant data. Brilliant work, Nathan, said Richard Prescott, Nathan's father and chairman emeritus. This is exactly the kind of bold thinking this company needs. I should have been furious. Instead, I felt oddly empowered. Nathan might have taken public credit, but he and I both knew the truth. And that knowledge created an intimacy between us, a secret partnership that felt special, almost sacred. After the meeting, he pulled me aside. You understand why I did that, don't you? They wouldn't have accepted such dramatic changes from me, I said pragmatically. I'm too new, too unknown. Exactly. His hand rested on my shoulder. This is how we'll work together, Olivia. You're the mind, I'm the face. For now. For now, I repeated, allowing myself to believe that someday it would be different. The restructuring was implemented exactly as I had designed. Profits soared. Nathan was featured in Forbes as a financial visionary redefining wealth management. The photo spread showed him in his corner office, an office I had helped decorate, selecting the artwork that would impress the photographer I knew was coming, even though Nathan never told me about the interview. 6 months into my new role, I met Benjamin Grant for the first time. Evermark Bank and Trust was one of our oldest institutional clients, and Benjamin was their senior partner in charge of strategic investments. He was in his early 50s, silver-haired and sharp-eyed, with the quiet confidence of someone who had nothing left to prove. "Ms. Bennett," he said, shaking my hand after a quarterly review meeting, "I've been watching your work with great interest." "My work?" I asked, surprised that anyone outside the company would recognize my contributions. "The Westridge portfolio restructuring, the new approach to high-net-worth management, the operational efficiencies in the Eastern Division." His eyes twinkled. "You have a distinctive style, Ms. Bennett. Mathematical, but humane. It's quite remarkable." "Thank you, but those initiatives were led by Mr. Prescott," I said carefully. Benjamin's smile was knowing. "Of course they were. My mistake." He handed me his card. "If you ever want to discuss finance theory, purely academically, of course, I'd be delighted to have lunch." Those lunches became a monthly occurrence. Benjamin never directly acknowledged that he knew I was the architect behind Prescott Financial's transformation, but he treated me like an intellectual equal, challenging my thinking and expanding my understanding of global finance in ways my state college education never had. "You have a natural gift," he told me during one of our discussions, "but gifts must be protected and nurtured, not ow. Everyone will celebrate your talents, Olivia. Some will feel threatened by them." I should have heeded his warning, but I was riding high on success and Nathan's apparent appreciation. When he invited me to join him for client dinners, industry events, even a weekend strategy retreat in Aspen, I interpreted it as growing respect, not strategic positioning. The first sign of trouble came when Nathan hired Rachel Harper, 29, MBA from Wharton, with perfect blonde hair and connections throughout Chicago's elite social circles. Her official title was Executive Assistant to the CEO, but her actual role seemed to be shadowing me. "I want her to learn from you," Nathan explained, "the way you've learned from me." Rachel was all smiles and flattery to my face. "I'm so excited to work with you, Olivia. Everyone says you're the secret weapon of Prescott Financial." But in meetings, I began noticing subtle undermining. She would question my projections in front of clients or mention alternative approaches Nathan had supposedly discussed with her privately. Small things easily dismissed individually, but forming a pattern I couldn't ignore. When I brought my concerns to Nathan, he laughed. "You're being paranoid, Olivia. Rachel admires you. She's just eager to contribute." Then came the Madison Square Capital deal, a potential partnership that would expand our East Coast presence dramatically. I spent weeks preparing the proposal, identifying synergies, calculating profit projections, drafting the presentation deck Nathan would deliver. The night before the presentation, I worked until midnight, making final adjustments. When I arrived the next morning, Nathan was already in the conference room with Rachel and the Madison team. "Ah, Olivia," he said casually. "We started early. Rachel had some excellent last-minute insights that I wanted to incorporate right away." I took my seat silently, watching as Nathan presented a version of my work that had been subtly altered. Key projections made more aggressive, risk assessments softened, my carefully crafted narrative replaced with flashier promises. When the Madison CEO asked about the risk factors, Nathan turned to Rachel. "Would you like to address that?" She smiled brilliantly. "Of course," as I was explaining to Nathan last night, while I was finalizing the presentation, they had been revising it together, removing my name from the document properties, positioning Rachel as the architect. The Madison deal fell through 3 weeks later. Their due diligence team found the projections unrealistic and the risk assessment dangerously inadequate, exactly the flaws I had predicted when I saw the revised presentation. Nathan was furious. "This is a major setback, Olivia. I expected better from your team." "My team?" I fought to keep my voice steady. "Nathan, you and Rachel completely rewrote my proposal without consulting me. Your proposal needed work," he snapped. "And frankly, I'm concerned about your attitude lately. The jealousy toward Rachel is unprofessional and beneath you." I felt like I'd been slapped. Jealousy? I'm trying to protect this company from making bad decisions. That's enough. His voice was cold. Remember your place, Olivia. You work for me, not the other way around. As I left his office, I saw Rachel waiting outside, a look of false sympathy on her perfect face. Don't take it so hard, she said softly. We all have our seasons. Yours was quite impressive while it lasted. I should have left then. Should have seen the writing on the wall. But Prescott Financial had become my identity, my achievement, my future. I couldn't walk away, not without a fight. What I didn't realize was that the real battle had only just begun. The weeks following the Madison debacle marked the beginning of my systematic removal from Prescott Financial's inner circle. Nathan's once frequent calls and texts dwindled to formal emails. Meetings I had previously led were rescheduled without my knowledge. Clients I had cultivated relationships with were suddenly assigned to team management, meaning Rachel. I was being erased. On a rainy Tuesday morning, I arrived to find my office access card deactivated. The security guard, Mike, who had greeted me by name for years, looked uncomfortable as he called upstairs. Sorry about this, Ms. Bennett. System glitch, they're saying. I need to issue you a temporary pass. The temporary pass, I discovered, no longer granted me access to the executive floor or the financial databases I needed for my work. IT security protocols, explained the help desk representative when I called. Your clearance level has been adjusted. I marched straight to Nathan's office only to be intercepted by Rachel. Nathan's in meetings all day, she said, her sympathetic smile never reaching her eyes. But HR has been trying to reach you, something about a revised role alignment. She handed me a folder. They asked me to deliver this if I saw you. Inside was a memo outlining my transition to an advisory capacity. My direct reports were being reassigned, my compensation structure revisited, my office relocated to the 32nd floor, away from the executive suite. This is ridiculous, I said, struggling to control my voice. Nathan can't just demote me without discussion. It's not a demotion, Rachel corrected, her tone professionally concerned. It's a strategic realignment to better utilize your specific skills. I pushed past her and knocked on Nathan's door, entering without waiting for a response. He was alone, reviewing documents at his desk. The surprise on his face quickly hardened into annoyance. Olivia, I'm extremely busy. I placed the folder on his desk. What is this? I believe the memo is self-explanatory. He didn't even look at it. You're pushing me out, after everything I've done for this company. For you. Nathan sighed, finally meeting my eyes. Let's be adults. About this. You've made valuable contributions, but the company is moving in a new direction. We need different leadership energy. Leadership energy? I repeated incredulously. Is that what Rachel provides? His expression darkened. This obsession with Rachel is unprofessional. The board has concerns about your attitude, your teamwork, your ability to adapt to our evolving corporate culture. The board hasn't even spoken to me. The board doesn't need to justify staffing decisions to executive advisors. He stood, signaling the conversation was over. Accept the restructuring gracefully, Olivia. Or don't. But this decision is final. I left his office shaking, with rage, with shock, with the humiliating sting of betrayal. 7 years of my life, countless 60-hour weeks, holidays, missed with my family. All of it dismissed as valuable contributions, while I was being systematically stripped of everything I'd worked for. That night, I sat in my condo overlooking the Chicago River, staring at the city lights without seeing them. My phone buzzed with a text from my father. You missed Sunday dinner again. Mom's worried. Everything okay, Livy? I hadn't told my parents about what was happening. They had been so proud of my success, had bragged to everyone at the diner about their daughter, the finance executive. How could I tell them it was crumbling beneath my feet? Just busy with work? I texted back. I'll visit next weekend. I opened my laptop and began calculating my options. My savings would last 6 months, maybe 8 if I was careful. The non-compete clause in my contract prevented me from working for any competing financial firm in Chicago for 2 years after leaving Prescott. I could fight the demotion legally, but corporate disputes were expensive and rarely favored the employee, regardless of merit. My phone rang. An unknown number. Ms. Bennett, Benjamin Grant here. I hope I'm not calling too late. The sound of his measured voice was inexplicably comforting. Not at all, Mr. Grant. What can I do for you? I was hoping we might meet for coffee tomorrow. There's a matter I'd like to discuss that wouldn't be appropriate for the office environment. We arranged to meet at a small cafe in Printers Row, far from the financial district. Benjamin was already there when I arrived, dressed casually in a sweater rather than his usual suit. "Thank you for coming," he said, gesturing to the chair across from him. "I've ordered their dark roast for us both, unless you'd prefer something else." "Dark roast is perfect." I sat down, suddenly aware of how exhausted I felt. "What's this about, Mr. Grant?" "Benjamin, please." He studied me for a moment. "You're being forced out at Prescott." It wasn't a question. I stared at him, unsure how to respond. "I've been in finance for 30 years, Olivia. I recognize the signs. The question is, what are you going to do about it?" "What can I do?" I said bitterly. "Nathan controls the board. He's systematically isolating me from clients and information. My options are to accept the demotion or resign." Benjamin leaned forward. "There's a third option." He slid a folder across the table. "Prescott Financial has been misrepresenting its earnings for the past 2 quarters. The Madison deal was meant to obscure the discrepancies before they became obvious." I felt the blood drain from my face. That's a serious accusation." "It's not an accusation. It's a fact." His expression was grave. "Nathan has been inflating performance numbers to maintain share prices while he liquidates his personal holdings. Several major clients are already quietly moving their funds." "How do you know this?" "Because Evermark handles transactions for 3 of Prescott's board members. They've been selling shares while publicly expressing confidence." I opened the folder. Inside were transaction records, internal memos, comparison charts showing reported versus actual performance metrics. The discrepancies were subtle but unmistakable. "Why are you showing me this?" I whispered. "Because you're the only executive at Prescott with both the integrity and intelligence to understand what it means." He held my gaze steadily. "And because I believe you deserve better than what Nathan Prescott is doing to you." I don't see how this helps me. If anything, being associated with a company committing fraud could destroy my career. Benjamin smiled slightly. "Unless you're the one who stops it." He explained his proposal. Several institutional investors, including Evermark, were concerned about Prescott's direction under Nathan. They wanted new leadership, ethical leadership, but needed to move carefully to avoid a public scandal that would tank their investments. "We can acquire controlling interest through private transactions," Benjamin explained. "But we need someone on the inside who understands the company's true operations." "You want me to be a whistleblower?" I asked skeptically. "No." His eyes held mine. "We want you to be the new CEO." I nearly choked on my coffee. "That's impossible. I don't have the capital to acquire shares, let alone controlling interest." "The capital has already been arranged. The shares would be purchased and placed in your name." He leaned back. "Think about it, Olivia. Everything you've built at Prescott, everything Nathan is trying to take from you, you could reclaim it all and run the company the right way." The offer was stunning, almost too perfect. "Why me? Why not install one of your own executives?" "Because, you've proven yourself. Because the clients respect you. Because you know this company better than anyone." He smiled. "And frankly, because watching Nathan Prescott have to answer to you would be immensely satisfying after what he's done." I sat in silence, turning the proposition over in my mind. It seemed too good to be true, and in my experience, such things usually were. "This isn't charity," Benjamin continued, reading my hesitation. "It's business. The investors I represent want returns, stability, and ethical management. You can provide all 3. And if I refuse, then we'll find another solution. But Prescott Financial will still face a reckoning for its financial misrepresentations, and your position will likely be eliminated in the fallout." It wasn't really a choice at all. "What would you need me to do?" "For now, nothing but maintain your position, no matter how uncomfortable Nathan makes it. Continue gathering information about operations. Attend every meeting you can. And most importantly," he emphasized, "attend the shareholders gala next month." "The gala?" I was confused. "Why is that important?" Benjamin's smile was enigmatic. "Because, Olivia, every great story needs a memorable final act." The next 3 weeks were an exercise in endurance. Nathan's strategic realignment of my role continued aggressively. My office was indeed relocated to the 32nd floor, a windowless interior room previously used for storage. My assistant was reassigned. My name was removed from the company directory. Each morning I put on my armor, designer suits that had once made me feel powerful, but now felt like costumes. I smiled at colleagues who averted their eyes, knowing that association with me had become professionally dangerous. I attended meetings where my input was no longer solicited, taking careful notes not just on what was said but on what was carefully omitted. Rachel now occupied the office adjacent to Nathan's, my former office, and made a point of being visible in my former role. She led client meetings, presented at strategy sessions, and was increasingly mentioned in company-wide emails as the architect of our new growth initiatives. Initiatives I had designed, relationships I had built, a future I had envisioned. Just a little longer, I reminded myself each night, reviewing the documents Benjamin had shared and adding my own observations. The fraud was more extensive than I had initially realized. Nathan wasn't just inflating performance metrics. He was actively diverting client funds into high-risk investments that benefited him personally through obscure offshore accounts. If exposed, it wouldn't just end his career. It would likely result in criminal charges. 2 weeks before the gala, I received a formal invitation in my company email. These invitations were typically hand-delivered to executives with personalized notes from Nathan. The electronic form was clearly meant as another slight. I RSVP'd immediately. Thank you for the invitation. I look forward to attending. Within an hour, Rachel appeared at my door. Olivia, there seems to be some confusion about the gala. Her smile was practiced perfection. It's really for senior leadership and key clients this year. We're keeping it more intimate. My invitation says otherwise. I replied calmly. Yes, well, that was an administrative oversight. I'm here to personally apologize for the mix-up. I leaned back in my chair. No mix-up, Rachel. I've attended the gala for 6 years. This will be my 7th. Her smile tightened almost imperceptibly. Nathan thought, given your transition, you might be uncomfortable. Nathan's concern is touching. Please assure him I'm quite comfortable representing Prescott Financial at events I helped build from the ground up. She hesitated, clearly not having expected resistance. I'll relay your message, but that will be all, Rachel. I turned my attention back to my computer, dismissing her as she had so often dismissed me. That evening, Benjamin called. They tried to uninvite you from the gala, he stated matter-of-factly. I was no longer surprised by his knowledge of Prescott's internal matters. They did. I declined to be uninvited. Good. Things are progressing on our end. The share acquisitions are nearly complete. Nathan hasn't noticed? The purchases are being made through various holding companies and trusts. By the time the transactions are publicly reported, it will be too late. I hesitated, then asked the question that had been nagging at me. Benjamin, why are you really doing this? This level of effort for a company Evermark could simply divest from seems excessive. There was a long pause before he answered. Do you know who founded Prescott Financial? Olivia? Richard Prescott, Nathan's father. That's the official history, Benjamin said quietly. The truth is more complicated. Richard had a partner when he started the firm, a man named James Harrington. They built the company together, but when it was time to go public, Richard pushed James out, restructured the ownership, diluted his shares, eventually forced him to sell at a fraction of their value. I've never heard of James Harrington, I said, confused by this history lesson. Few have. Richard was thorough in erasing him from the company's story. Benjamin's voice had a weight I hadn't heard before. James Harrington was my father-in-law. He died believing his life's work had been stolen from him. In many ways, it was. Understanding dawned slowly. This isn't just business. For you. Everything is personal in finance, Olivia, no matter what they teach in business school. But this is about justice. About setting right a wrong that has festered for too long. He paused. Nathan is his father's son. Entitled, ruthless, willing to sacrifice others for his own gain. When I saw him doing to you what Richard did to James, history repeating itself, you decided to, intervene. I finished for him. I decided to give you the opportunity James never had. His voice softened. The choice to take it remains yours. The night before the gala, I visited my parents' diner for the first time in months. Sunday dinner had always been sacred in my family, but as I rose through Prescott's ranks, my absences had become more frequent, my visits shorter. The bell above the carry door jingled as I entered. The familiar smells of my childhood, coffee, bacon, my mother's signature apple pie, wrapped around me like a warm blanket. Livy! My mother rushed from behind the counter, wiping her hands on her apron before embracing me. At 62, Elena Bennett was still a force of nature, her dark hair now streaked with silver, her eyes as bright and sharp as ever. My father looked up from the grill, his face breaking into a wide smile. Well, look who remembered where she came from. I hugged them both, fighting back unexpected tears. I've missed you guys. Over dinner in the empty diner after closing time, I told them everything. Nathan's betrayal, my systematic removal, Benjamin's offer. I had kept so many secrets from them, trying to protect them from the uglier realities of corporate America, but I couldn't face tomorrow without their counsel. My father listened silently, his weathered hands folded on the table. My mother's expressions shifted from shock to outrage to fierce determination. "You're sure about this, Benjamin?" she asked when I finished. Men making grand promises often have agendas of their own. "I've verified everything he's told me," I assured her. "The share purchases are real. The fraud is real. And you want to run this company?" My father asked quietly. "After what they've done to you?" I considered his question carefully. "I want to fix what Nathan broke. I want to protect the clients who trust us with their futures. And yes," I admitted, "I want to reclaim what I helped build." He nodded slowly. "Just remember what I taught you, Livy. Success without integrity isn't success at all. It's just failure wearing expensive clothes." "I remember, Dad." I reached for his hand. "That's why I have to do this." As I left, my mother pressed a small box into my hand. Inside was her grandmother's necklace, a simple silver pendant with a blue stone that had been passed down through generations of Bennett women. "For courage," she whispered, fastening it around my neck. "Remember who you are tomorrow." The morning of the gala, I woke before dawn and stood at my window, watching the sun rise over Lake Michigan. Whatever happened tonight would change my life irrevocably. There would be no going back to the woman I had been when I first walked into Prescott Financial 7 years ago. I spent the day preparing, not just physically, but mentally. I reviewed every document, every transaction record Benjamin had provided. I wrote out exactly what I would say when the moment came. I rehearsed maintaining my composure in the face of whatever Nathan might do. At 6 p.m., I slipped into the midnight blue gown I had purchased months ago, when I still believed I would be attending the gala as Nathan's trusted advisor. I fastened my mother's necklace around my throat, the blue stone resting against my collarbone like a talisman. "Remember who you are, Olivia," I whispered to my reflection. "Bennett women don't break." At 7:30, my car arrived at the Drake Hotel. As I stepped into the grand ballroom, I felt every eye turn toward me. The whispers began immediately. Executives who had expected me to quietly disappear, now confronted with my refusal to be erased. Nathan stood near the center of the room, champagne in hand, Rachel at his side. When he saw me, his smile faltered for just a moment before he recovered, leaning to whisper something to Rachel. I moved through the crowd, accepting a glass of champagne from a passing waiter, acknowledging the few brave souls who greeted me. And then I waited for the moment when everything would change. The annual shareholders gala at the Drake Hotel had always been Prescott Financial's crowning event, a carefully orchestrated display of success, wealth, and power. Crystal chandeliers sparkled overhead, reflecting in the champagne flutes and silver cutlery. Chicago's financial elite circulated in designer evening wear, the air thick with expensive perfume and, the quiet hum of privilege. I stood near the entrance, sipping champagne I couldn't taste, watching Nathan work the room. He moved with practiced charm, laughing at the right moments, touching elbows reassuringly, Rachel shadowing his every move like a perfectly coordinated dance partner. "Ms. Bennett." Benjamin Grant appeared at my side, immaculate in a tailored tuxedo. "You look formidable this evening." "I feel like I'm walking into battle," I admitted quietly. "In many ways, you are." He nodded toward Nathan. "He's about to announce record quarterly earnings, completely fabricated, of course." "When will you—" I began. "Patience," Benjamin murmured. "Timing is everything in finance and theater, and tonight is a bit of both." The dinner service began precisely at 8. I was seated at a table far from the main stage, another calculated slight, surrounded by junior associates and minor clients who seemed unsure whether acknowledging me would help or harm their careers. I made polite conversation, asked about their families, their investments, their concerns about the market. Even as my heart hammered in my chest, I projected the calm confidence that had become my professional signature. At precisely 8:45, Nathan took the stage, glass in hand. The room fell silent. "Distinguished guests, valued clients, esteemed colleagues," he began, his voice carrying effortlessly through the ballroom. "Welcome to Prescott Financial's 17th annual shareholders celebration." Applause rippled through the room. "This has been a transformative year for our firm. Despite market volatility, We've achieved record growth in all major divisions. Our client retention rate stands at 97%, the highest in our history. A blatant lie. I knew the actual retention rate had fallen to 78% as major clients quietly moved their assets. Tonight, I'm proud to announce that Prescott Financial's third quarter earnings have exceeded projections by 22%, setting a new benchmark for excellence in wealth management. More applause, more lies. This success reflects our commitment to innovation, integrity, and client service, values that define not just our business practices, but our company culture. His gaze swept the room, briefly landing on me with the slightest narrowing of his eyes. Speaking of culture, he continued, his tone shifting subtly. Prescott Financial has always believed in rewarding loyalty and performance, in recognizing those who truly embody our values. He gestured to Rachel, who stood and made her way to the stage with practiced grace. It is my great pleasure to announce Rachel Harper's promotion to Chief Strategy Officer, effective immediately. Rachel's vision and dedication have been instrumental in our recent successes, and this new role reflects her growing importance to Prescott Financial's future. The room erupted in applause. Rachel smiled modestly, touching Nathan's arm in a gesture of gratitude that lingered just a moment too long. And now, Nathan said, raising his glass, a toast to continued prosperity and partnership. As glasses were raised around the room, he added almost casually, "Oh, and I see Ms. Olivia Bennett has joined us tonight." The room quieted, all eyes turning toward me. Ms. Bennett has been with Prescott Financial for several years in various support capacities. While her contributions have been appreciated, I believe there's been some confusion about her current role within the company. My fingers tightened around my champagne flute. To be clear, Nathan continued, his smile never reaching his eyes, Ms. Bennett is transitioning to an advisory position with significantly reduced responsibilities. She is not authorized to represent Prescott Financial in any official capacity, including at events such as this. The silence in the room was deafening. I could feel the heat of embarrassment rising in my cheeks, the stares of pity and discomfort from those around me. "Ms. Bennett," Nathan concluded, "I think you've overstayed your welcome. This dinner is for key stakeholders, and you, unfortunately, no longer qualify." Laughter rippled through the room, nervous, uncomfortable, but laughter nonetheless. Rachel smirked behind her champagne glass, whispering something to the CFO beside her. This was the moment they had planned, my public humiliation, my final removal from the Prescott hierarchy. The moment when Nathan would definitively establish that I was nothing, that I had always been nothing, that whatever success I had achieved had been merely a reflection of his generosity. I didn't move, didn't cry, didn't argue. I simply reached into my clutch and withdrew the letter I had received that morning, the culmination of Benjamin's careful planning, and held it in my trembling hands. "Actually," Benjamin's voice cut through the tension as he rose from his table, "she may be the only one here with actual controlling interest in this company." Every head turned as Benjamin walked toward the stage, manila folder in hand. "What is this?" Nathan demanded, his composure slipping for the first time. "Facts, Mr. Prescott." Benjamin placed the documents on the podium. The majority shares of Prescott Financial were quietly transferred under a new name 2 weeks ago. He slid the papers toward the board members seated in the front row. "And that name is Olivia Bennett." Gasps echoed through the ballroom. Nathan's face transformed before my eyes, smugness dissolving into confusion, then shock, then something resembling terror. "This is absurd," he sputtered. "These signatures, this is some kind of stunt." "Every signature has been verified," Benjamin replied calmly, "as have the financial irregularities in your quarterly reports. The SEC has already been notified." Nathan's wineglass slipped from his fingers, shattering against the marble floor, a sound that seemed to crystallize the moment his carefully constructed world began to collapse. I stood, my legs steadier than I had expected, and made my way to the stage. The crowd parted before me like the Red Sea, expressions ranging from shock to confusion to dawning comprehension. Rachel backed away as I approached, her perfect composure fracturing visibly. "This is impossible," Nathan hissed as I reached the podium. "You don't have the resources, the connections." "She has integrity, Nathan," Benjamin interrupted, "something you've consistently undervalued." I took the microphone, the weight of all eyes in the room pressing against me. "For 7 years," I began, my voice surprisingly calm, "I have given everything to this company. My time, my ideas, my future. I believed in what we were building, a financial institution that served its clients with honesty and excellence. I looked directly at Nathan. What I didn't realize was that while I was building, others were taking credit for my work, taking advantage of client trust, taking what wasn't theirs to take. I held up the ownership documents. These shares represent more than a change in management. They represent a return to the values this company was founded on: integrity, transparency, and genuine service to our clients. I turned to address the entire room. To our clients and partners, I want to assure you that Prescott Financial's future is secure. The irregularities in recent financial reporting will be fully investigated and corrected. Any discrepancies will be disclosed and rectified. Your trust is our most valuable asset, and we will work tirelessly to honor it. The silence in the room was absolute. As for immediate changes, I continued. Effective immediately, Nathan Prescott is removed from his position as CEO pending a full financial audit. All executive decisions will require board approval until a new leadership structure is formally established. Nathan lunged toward me, his face contorted with rage. You can't do this. You're nothing. You were nothing when I found you, and you're nothing now. Security personnel moved swiftly, positioning themselves between us. Please escort Mr. Prescott from the premises, I said quietly. His personal effects will be sent to his home address. As Nathan was led away, still shouting threats and accusations, I caught Rachel attempting to slip out a side door. Ms. Harper, I called, my voice carrying across the now silent room. I believe you have a company laptop and phone in your possession. Security will accompany you to collect your personal items before you leave. Her face drained of color as she realized the extent of her fall. She had tied her fate so completely to Nathan's that she hadn't prepared for his failure. As the commotion settled, Benjamin joined me at the podium. Ladies and gentlemen, he addressed the stunned audience, I suggest we adjourn the formal portion of tonight's event. Ms. Bennett will be available to address any immediate concerns, and a full shareholder briefing will be scheduled for next week. As the crowd dispersed into murmuring clusters, Benjamin turned to me. Well done, he said softly. The hard part begins tomorrow. I nodded, the adrenaline that had carried me through the confrontation beginning to ebb. Was it worth it? He asked, studying my face. The vindication? I considered his question, watching as Nathan's closest allies hurriedly exited the ballroom, while others lingered, clearly recalculating their allegiances. This wasn't about vindication, I finally answered. It was about correction. Setting things right. Benjamin smiled slightly. You really believe that, don't you? I have to, I replied. Otherwise, I'm just another Nathan Prescott. The morning after the gala, I arrived at Prescott Financial before dawn. The night security guard did a double take as I approached the executive elevator. Ms. Bennett, I heard about last night, but it's all right, Jim. I smiled, remembering how he had always saved me the good donuts on early mornings. A lot has changed very quickly. Yes, ma'am. He straightened slightly. Congratulations, if that's the right thing to say. Thank you is always the right thing to say, I replied, stepping into the elevator. Nathan's office, now my office, was exactly as he had left it. Expensive, imposing, and utterly soulless. Chrome and glass and leather, designed to intimidate rather than welcome. The only personal touch was a wall of photographs showing Nathan with celebrities and politicians, visual trophies of his perceived importance. I set my bag on the desk and walked to the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Chicago's skyline. Dawn was breaking over Lake Michigan, painting the city in soft pinks and golds. 7 years ago, I had stood in this same building, 20 floors below, dreaming of a future I could barely imagine. Now I was here, at the summit I had climbed toward so relentlessly, but the victory felt hollow, tinged with the bitterness of betrayal and the weight of the enormous task ahead. My phone buzzed with a text from Benjamin. First executive meeting in 30 minutes. Boardroom C. The vultures are circling. I took a deep breath and began preparing. By the time I entered Boardroom C, I had reviewed the latest financial reports, drafted a preliminary statement for clients, and outlined an emergency stabilization plan. The room fell silent as I entered. 8 executive vice presidents, all men, all at least a decade older than me, stared with expressions ranging from open hostility to cautious neutrality. Benjamin sat at the far end, his face impassive. Good morning, gentlemen, I said, taking the seat at the head of the table. I understand you have questions, and I'm here to answer them. But first, let me be clear about 3 things. I placed my portfolio on the table. 1. Prescott Financial is facing a significant crisis due to financial misrepresentations under Nathan's leadership. 2. Resolving this crisis will require complete transparency, both internally and with our clients. 3. Anyone unwilling to operate with absolute integrity should tender their resignation immediately. There will be no golden parachutes, no quiet departures. Is that understood? The silence was deafening. Marcus Levine, EVP of Client Relations, was the first to speak. With all due respect, Ms. Bennett, many of us have decades of experience in finance. The situation you're describing would destroy client confidence and potentially the company itself. There are more discreet ways to handle discrepancies. Discrepancies? I repeated. Is that what we're calling fraud now, Marcus? Because the SEC has a different vocabulary. The SEC doesn't need to be involved, interjected William Foster, Chief Risk Officer. We can restate earnings quietly over time. Standard procedure. There's nothing standard about what's happened here, I countered. Nathan diverted client funds into personal offshore accounts. He falsified reports to hide losses. He violated the trust of every person who put their financial future in our hands. Alleged violations, corrected Foster. Nothing's been proven. I slid copies of the documentation across the table. Page 16. The Westmoreland Pension Fund. $23 million moved through 3 shell companies and ultimately into Nathan's personal account in the Caymans. Page 22. The Rivera Family Trust. $8 million siphoned through similar channels. As they flipped through the evidence, the atmosphere in the room shifted palpably. Jesus Christ, muttered Thomas Chen, head of compliance. How did we miss this? You missed it because you were meant to miss it. Benjamin spoke for the first time. Nathan compartmentalized information, isolated oversight, created a system where no single person saw the complete picture. Except Olivia, said James Wilson, the most senior executive, present. He studied me with new interest. You put it together. I started noticing discrepancies months ago. I confirmed. Clients reporting different portfolio values than our internal records showed. Investment allocations that didn't match client directives. Nathan's unusual interest in certain accounts. And instead of coming to us, you went to an outside institution, Foster said, accusingly, nodding toward Benjamin. Would you have believed her? Benjamin asked mildly. Or would you have reported her concerns directly to Nathan? Foster's silence was answer enough. Gentlemen, I said, reclaiming control of the meeting, what's done is done. We have approximately 72 hours before the SEC makes their investigation public. We have 2 choices. We can try to hide the truth and all go down with Nathan, or we can get ahead of this, demonstrate complete cooperation, and save what can be saved. What exactly are you proposing? Asked Chen. Full disclosure to all affected clients. Immediate restitution from the company's reserves. A comprehensive internal audit with external oversight. And a restructuring plan that emphasizes transparency and accountability at every level. That will cost millions, protested Foster. Integrity often does, I replied, but the alternative is extinction. Prescott Financial won't survive a public scandal of this magnitude without taking dramatic action to restore trust. The debate continued for hours. By noon, we had reached a tentative consensus on immediate steps. 4 executives had resigned rather than face the scrutiny ahead. The remaining team, though shaken, seemed cautiously committed to the recovery plan. As the meeting adjourned, James Wilson lingered behind. I've been with this company for 26 years, he said quietly. Worked directly with Richard Prescott before Nathan took over. I should have seen this coming. We all should have, I acknowledged. He shook his head. Not you. You did see it. And you did something about it. He offered his hand. Whatever happens next, you've got my support, Ms. Bennett. Thank you, I said, surprised by the gesture. And please, call me Olivia. The days that followed were a blur of crisis management. The SEC announcement came exactly when Benjamin had predicted. The financial media descended like locusts, with headlines ranging from Prescott Financial, the fall of a dynasty, to Bennett's coup, revenge or rescue. I worked 20-hour days, meeting with clients personally to explain what had happened and how we planned to make it right. Some left immediately, unwilling to trust any promises from Prescott Financial. Others, particularly those I had built relationships with over the years, cautiously agreed to stay, provided they received regular updates on the recovery process. The most difficult meeting was with the employee base. Over 300 people worked at Prescott, most of whom had no knowledge of Nathan's schemes. Their jobs, their reputations, their financial security, all were now in jeopardy because of actions they hadn't participated in or benefited from. I can't promise there won't be changes. I told them honestly from the podium of our largest conference room. What I can promise is that every decision will be made with transparency. No one will arrive to find their access card deactivated or their role eliminated without warning or explanation. We're going to face this together, with honesty and respect. One young analyst raised her hand. Ms. Bennett, the press is saying you orchestrated a takeover for revenge. Is that true? The room fell silent, awaiting my answer. I orchestrated a correction, I said carefully. Nathan Prescott was defrauding clients and destroying this company. That needed to be stopped. Was there a personal element? Yes. I won't pretend otherwise. But revenge doesn't build things. It only tears them down. I'm here to build. Late one night, as I reviewed audit reports in Nathan's former office, there was a knock at the door. Benjamin entered carrying 2 cups of coffee. You should go home, he said, setting 1 cup on my desk. You've been here for 18 hours. I rubbed my eyes. There's too much to do. There will always be too much to do. He sat across from me. That's the nature of cleaning up someone else's mess. I took a sip of the coffee, prepared exactly as I liked it, with a hint of cinnamon. Have you heard from Nathan? His lawyers are negotiating with the SEC. He's likely facing criminal charges, but with his resources, he'll probably manage a plea deal. Benjamin studied me. Does that bother you? I considered the question. What bothers me is that he'll never truly understand what he did wrong. Not morally. Anyway, some people aren't capable of that kind of understanding, Benjamin observed. They see the world only in terms of what they can take from it. Is that how your father-in-law felt about Richard Prescott? Benjamin's expression softened at the mention of James Harrington. He was more philosophical about it toward the end. Said that Richard had taken his company but couldn't take his integrity. That ultimately, that was worth more. I nodded, thinking of my father's words. Success without integrity isn't success at all. It's just failure wearing expensive clothes. What happens now? I asked. With the investors you represent? They got what they wanted, control of Prescott Financial. Do they expect me to simply hand it over once the crisis is managed? They expect you to run it, Benjamin replied, as you were meant to all along. 3 months after the gala that changed everything, I stood in the newly renovated reception area of what was now officially Bennett Financial Group. The Prescott name had been removed, not out of spite, but necessity. The brand had become toxic, associated with fraud and deception in the financial press. The rebranding was just one of many changes. We had moved to a smaller, more efficient office space in the West Loop, still prestigious but less ostentatious than the Michigan Avenue Tower. We had streamlined our service offerings, focusing on what we did best rather than trying to be everything to everyone. Most importantly, we had implemented a revolutionary transparency policy that gave clients unprecedented access to information about their investments. The conference room is ready, said Maya Rodriguez, my chief of staff, a position I had created specifically to ensure nothing fell through the cracks during our rebuilding. Thank you, Maya. Are they all here? Everyone except Mr. Chen. His flight from San Francisco was delayed, but he's on his way from the airport now. I nodded and took a deep breath. Today marked a milestone, our first quarterly board meeting since the restructuring. The new board was smaller but more diverse, consisting of financial experts, client representatives, and ethics specialists, a deliberate move away from the old boys network that had enabled Nathan's abuses. As I entered the conference room, I was greeted by faces both familiar and new. Benjamin Grant sat at the far end, as he had in that first crisis meeting. James Wilson, the veteran executive who had chosen to stay and help rebuild, nodded respectfully. Rebecca Chang, formerly one of our largest clients and now our most vocal advocate, smiled warmly. Good morning, everyone, I began, taking my seat. Before we dive into the quarterly results, I want to thank each of you for your commitment during this transition. What we've accomplished in 3 months would normally take years. You've set quite a pace, observed Dr. Elaine Foster, our newly appointed ethics officer, and ironically the sister of William Foster, who had resigned rather than face the scrutiny of our internal audit. Necessity dictated the pace, I acknowledged. We needed to move quickly to preserve client confidence and stabilize the company. And the results speak for themselves, Benjamin added, opening the financial report before him. Client retention has stabilized at 68%. Given the circumstances, that's remarkable. It's not just retention, Rebecca Chang interjected. It's the quality of the relationships. My fellow clients and I feel heard in a way we never did under the previous management. There's a genuine partnership now. The meeting progressed through our financial recovery plan, our new compliance protocols, and our growth strategy for the coming year. The numbers were sobering but promising. We had stopped the bleeding and were beginning to rebuild. As the meeting concluded, Thomas Chen finally arrived, looking harried but excited. Sorry I'm late, he apologized, but I have news that couldn't wait. The SEC has officially closed its investigation into all current Bennett Financial employees. None of us will face charges related to Nathan's fraud. A collective sigh of relief swept through the room. While Benjamin and I had been confident that our cooperation would protect the innocent, the cloud of potential legal consequences had hung over everyone who had worked at Prescott during Nathan's tenure. What about Nathan? James asked the question everyone was thinking. He's accepted a plea deal, Thomas reported. 5 years in a minimum security facility, financial penalties, and a lifetime ban from the securities industry. I felt a complex wave of emotions, not satisfaction exactly, but a sense that justice, however imperfect, had been served. There's one more thing, Thomas added, sliding a newspaper across the table. Rachel Harper has agreed to testify against him in exchange for immunity. She's provided details about client accounts we didn't even know were compromised. I looked at the headline. Prescott's right hand turns state's evidence. Former executive reveals depth of fraud. Is she named in the article? I asked, concerned despite everything about Rachel's future. Only as a former executive, Thomas confirmed. The prosecutors are protecting her identity for now, though it won't stay secret for long. As the board members dispersed, Benjamin lingered behind. You're not celebrating, he observed. I shook my head. It feels wrong to celebrate anyone's downfall, even Nathan's. Even after what he did to you? Especially after what he did to me. I gathered my notes from the table. If I took joy in his punishment, I'd be no better than he was. Benjamin studied me with that same thoughtful expression he'd worn when we first met for coffee in that quiet cafe. You continue to surprise me, Olivia Bennett. In good ways, I hope. In the best possible ways. He hesitated, then added, I have a personal matter to discuss, if you have a moment. We moved to my office, a modest space I had designed to be welcoming rather than intimidating. No chrome and glass here. Instead, warm woods, comfortable seating, and photographs of Chicago neighborhoods rather than celebrities. Evermark's board is concerned about a potential conflict of interest, Benjamin began once we were seated. My heart sank. Because of your position on our board? Because of my personal investment in this company's success. He met my eyes directly. An investment that has become increasingly emotional in nature. I felt my cheeks warm slightly. Over the past 3 months, Benjamin and I had worked closely together, often late into the night. Our professional relationship had gradually evolved into something warmer, more complex, though neither of us had acknowledged it directly. I see, I said carefully. And what solution does Evermark propose? That I resign from their board to eliminate the conflict. His expression remained unreadable. Unless you feel that would create difficulties for Bennett Financial. The implication was clear. He was choosing me, us, over his position at Evermark. That's a significant career decision. Benjamin, are you certain? I've been at Evermark for 23 years, he said quietly. It's been a good chapter, but I find myself ready for something new. And what would that something be? I asked, my heart beating faster despite my efforts to maintain professional composure. A smile played at the corners of his mouth. I believe that remains to be seen, but I'm optimistic about the possibilities. That evening, I visited my parents' diner for our reinstated Sunday dinner tradition. The small restaurant was closed to the public, but filled with the aromas of my mother's cooking and the familiar sounds of home. There she is, my father called from behind the counter. The financial genius. I hugged them both, savoring the normalcy of the moment. No matter what happened in the corporate world, here I was simply Livy, their daughter who still couldn't make pancakes without burning the edges. Over my mother's legendary pot roast, I shared the news about the SEC investigation and Nathan's plea deal. 5 years seems light for what he did, my father grumbled. Maybe, I conceded, but he's lost everything that truly mattered to him, his reputation, his power, his future in the industry. The legal punishment is almost secondary. And what about you? My mother asked, her eyes searching mine. Are you finding peace with all this? I considered her question carefully. I'm finding purpose, I finally answered. The company needs rebuilding. Our clients need reassurance. Our employees need leadership. It's not about me anymore. It's about making something worthwhile out of the mess Nathan left behind. And that Benjamin fellow? My father's tone was casual, but his gaze was shrewd. He's still in the picture? I felt myself blushing like a teenager. He's resigning from Evermark to avoid conflicts of interest with his position on our board. My parents exchanged a knowing look. What? I demanded. Nothing, my mother said innocently. Just remembering how your father left his accounting job to help me run this diner. To avoid conflicts of interest, he said. That was different, my father protested, though his eyes twinkled. I was already madly in love with you. And I with you, my mother replied, patting his hand. Sometimes the best business decisions are really about matters of the heart. I rolled my eyes, but their words stayed with me as I drove home along Lakeshore Drive, the city lights reflecting in the dark water of Lake Michigan. For so long, I had defined myself by my career, my ambitions, my professional identity. The idea that there might be room for something more, something personal, felt both terrifying and exhilarating. My phone rang through my car speakers. Benjamin. I hope I'm not calling too late, he said when I answered. Not at all. I'm just driving home from my parents. How was dinner? Enlightening, I said, smiling despite myself. My mother has developed a sudden interest in corporate governance and conflicts of interest. His chuckle warmed something inside me. Smart woman, your mother. She has her moments. I paused, then added, Would you like to have dinner tomorrow? Not at the office, not with files and reports. Just dinner. I'd like that very much, he replied, and I could hear the smile in his voice. As I pulled into my building's garage, I felt something I hadn't experienced in months, a sense of possibility, of a future not entirely defined by Nathan's betrayal or the company's recovery, a future that might include something I hadn't allowed myself to want or expect, personal happiness alongside professional fulfillment. For the first time since that night at the gala, I felt truly free. 1 year to the day after the shareholders gala that had changed everything, I stood in the ballroom of the Chicago Cultural Center, surveying the transformed company I now led. The inaugural Bennett Financial Group client appreciation event was in full swing, not a formal dinner with assigned seating and corporate speeches, but a vibrant gathering where clients, employees, and community partners mingled as equals. Instead of crystal chandeliers and silver service, we had chosen the Cultural Center for its stunning Tiffany dome and its significance as a public space, a place that belonged to all Chicagoans. The evening was a celebration not just of financial success, but of the values that now defined our company: transparency, integrity, and genuine partnership. Quite different from last year, Benjamin observed, appearing at my side with 2 glasses of champagne. I accepted one gratefully. That was the point. I wanted nothing about tonight to echo that night. Mission accomplished. He gestured toward the diverse crowd. Though I noticed you kept, the midnight blue dress tradition. I smoothed the silk of my gown, different from last year's, but the same deep blue. Some traditions are worth keeping. We had come a long way in 12 months. Bennett Financial Group had not only stabilized, but begun to thrive under our new model. We were smaller than Prescott had been at its height. We had consciously shed the divisions that had engaged in the riskiest practices, but we were more profitable per client and, more importantly, more trusted. The media narrative had evolved from Prescott financial scandal to Bennett's reformation, with industry publications highlighting our innovative transparency protocols and client-centered approach. Just last month, Financial Management Quarterly had named me one of their 40 under 40 leaders, transforming the financial industry. Ms. Bennett? A familiar voice interrupted my thoughts. I turned to find Rachel Harper standing before me, visibly nervous but determined. She looked different, simpler, without the perfect blowout and designer clothes that had been her uniform at Prescott. Rachel, I acknowledged, surprised to see her. She hadn't been on the guest list. I didn't expect you. I wasn't planning to come, she admitted, but I saw the article about tonight's event and I needed to say something to you in person. Benjamin discreetly stepped away, giving us privacy while remaining protectively within eyesight. Would you like to sit down? I gestured toward an empty table nearby. She nodded gratefully and we moved away from the main crowd. I've been in Arizona. She began awkwardly. Starting over, teaching business ethics at a community college if you can believe it. That's unexpected. I replied, unsure what else to say. It wasn't my first choice, she acknowledged with a bitter laugh. But opportunities are limited when you're known as the whistleblower in a major financial fraud case. She fidgeted with her handbag. Even if you were complicit in, that fraud, your testimony helped a lot of clients recover their money, I said, finding myself oddly reluctant to condemn her despite our history. I didn't do it for them. Her honesty was startling. I did it to save myself, just like I did everything else. I waited, sensing she had more to say. I hated you, she continued, her voice low. Not because you did anything to me, but because Nathan respected you in a way he never respected me. No matter what I did, how perfectly I performed, I was always just useful to him. But you challenged him, and he listened. Not enough to stop him from trying to destroy me, I pointed out. Because you scared him. She looked up, meeting my eyes directly. He knew you were better than him. Smarter, more capable, more ethical. Everything. He pretended to be, you actually were. I was stunned by her assessment. Rachel, I'm not asking for forgiveness, she interrupted, or a job or anything else. I just wanted you to know that I understand now what I was part of, and I'm sorry. She stood abruptly. That's all I came to say. As she turned to leave, I found myself calling after her. Rachel, she paused. The community college program, is it working out for you? A flicker of surprise crossed her face. Actually, yes. The students are different from what I'm used to. Real people with real lives, not just ambitious kids with trust funds. It's humanizing. I nodded. Good. I'm glad you found something meaningful. She studied me for a moment. You really mean that, don't you? After everything, holding on to anger only weighs you down, I said simply. I've learned that the hard way. After she left, Benjamin rejoined me. That looked intense. It was. I glanced toward the door where Rachel had disappeared. But necessary, I think, for both of us. You continue to surprise me with your capacity for forgiveness, he said, his hand finding mine. Not forgiveness exactly, I corrected. Understanding. We all make choices based on who we believe we are and what we think we deserve. Rachel believed she was someone who had to fight for scraps from Nathan's table. I believed I was someone who had to prove my worth through sacrifice and loyalty. We were both wrong. Our conversation was interrupted by Maya signaling that it was time for my address to the gathering. Benjamin squeezed my hand, encouragingly, as I made my way to the small podium we had set up beneath the Tiffany Dome. Good evening, everyone, I began, looking out at the faces of clients, colleagues, and partners who had taken this journey with me. Thank you for being here tonight to celebrate not just the first anniversary of Bennett Financial Group, but the power of new beginnings. The room quieted, all attention focused forward. A year ago, I stood in a very different room, facing what seemed like the end of everything I had worked for. What I didn't realize then was that it wasn't an ending at all, but the beginning of something far more meaningful than I could have imagined. I paused, looking at my parents seated in the front row, my father's eyes shining with pride, my mother's hand clasped tightly in his. My father taught me long ago that success without integrity isn't success at all. It's just failure wearing expensive clothes. For too long, much of the financial industry has been dressed in very expensive failure. Tonight, we celebrate a different path, one where transparency replaces secrecy, where service replaces exploitation, where partnership replaces hierarchy. I gestured to the diverse gathering before me. Look around this room. What you see isn't just a financial company and its clients. You see a community built on trust and mutual respect. You see proof that ethical business isn't just morally right, it's profitable and sustainable. I raised my glass. To all of you who believed in this vision when it was just that, a vision. To those who trusted us with your financial futures during our darkest hour. To the team members who chose integrity over expediency. And to the possibility that we are creating something here that will long outlast any of us. A new model for what wealth management can and should be. After the applause and the toast, I stepped away from the podium, immediately surrounded by well-wishers and congratulations. It was nearly an hour before I could extract myself and find a quiet moment on the balcony overlooking Millennium Park. The Chicago skyline sparkled before me, the same view I had admired from my office window that first morning after the gala, when everything had felt so uncertain. Now, looking at those same buildings, I felt something I hadn't expected. Peace. There you are, Benjamin said, joining me on the balcony. Hiding from your admirers? Just taking a moment to breathe, I replied, smiling as he wrapped his jacket around my shoulders against the evening chill. Our relationship had deepened gradually over the past year, evolving from professional allies to friends to something much more significant, though we had been careful to maintain appropriate boundaries at work. Your speech was perfect, he said, especially the part about creating something that will outlast us. I meant it, I said, turning to face him. What we're building isn't just about financial returns or even about our careers. It's about changing how things are done. Speaking of changes, Benjamin said, his expression growing serious, the board approved my proposal this morning. The succession plan? I asked, surprised. That wasn't scheduled for review until next quarter. Not that proposal. He reached into his pocket and withdrew a small velvet box. This one. My breath caught as he opened it to reveal a simple but elegant diamond ring. Benjamin. Olivia Bennett, he said quietly. You are the most extraordinary person I have ever known. Your integrity, your brilliance, your compassion. They've transformed not just a company, but everyone around you, including me. He took my hand. I love you. Not the CEO, not the financial prodigy, but you, the woman who visits her parents every Sunday, who remembers the security guard's children's names, who gave Rachel Harper grace she didn't deserve. I felt tears welling in my eyes. I don't want to be just your board member or your business partner or even just your boyfriend. I want to build a life with you, a life that balances the work we're both passionate about with the joy of being together. He held up the ring. Will you marry me, Olivia? In that moment, standing above the city that had witnessed my greatest defeat and my most meaningful victory, I realized that true success wasn't measured in titles or assets or power. It was measured in connections, in purpose, in love, freely given and received. Yes, I said simply, my heart full. Yes, I will. As Benjamin slipped the ring onto my finger and pulled me into his arms, I thought about the long journey that had brought me here, from the Southside Diner to executive assistant to the CEO of my own company. Each step, even the painful ones, had been necessary to shape the person I had become. Nathan Prescott had tried to erase me, to reduce me to nothing. In doing so, he had inadvertently given me the opportunity to become more than I had ever imagined possible, not just professionally, but personally. To build not just a successful company, but a meaningful life. My mother's necklace, the one she had given me for courage on the night of the gala, still rested against my collarbone, the blue stone catching the lights of the city. It reminded me of her words that night. Remember who you are. I had remembered, and in remembering, I had discovered that I was so much more than anyone, including myself, had ever believed. As Benjamin and I returned to the celebration hand in hand, I caught my father's eye across the room. He noticed the eye ring immediately, his face breaking into a joyous smile as he nudged my mother. Their happiness, their pride, their unwavering belief in me even when I had drifted from their simple values. It all came full circle in this moment. The road ahead would have its challenges. Building something lasting always did. But tonight, surrounded by the community we had created from the ashes of betrayal, I knew, with absolute certainty, that we were equal to whatever came next. Not because we were perfect or all-powerful, but because we had discovered what truly mattered: integrity, purpose, and the courage to begin again. And that, in the end, was the greatest success of all.